Hello, everyone. This is Joseph Schooland. I'm an account manager here at Populi. Maybe you've talked with me before. Maybe I've worked with you. I might be your account manager, or you might be working with Nick Holloway. He's our other account manager here. And you probably know a lot of people on our support team and know them by names. We've got a lot of J's, so that can be confusing. A Josh and a Jordan and a Joseph. So hopefully you're keeping all of us straight and kind of getting to know us a little bit. We're not a big shop. I think so it's at least our support team and account management team are small enough to get to know. So hopefully you're able to do that. I'm still seeing some people trickle in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just in case you missed it, quick housekeeping. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box. I can see that much more clearly and easily on my other screen. If you put it into the chat window, I'll probably miss it. And I don't want to miss your questions. So please put them in a place where I can definitely see them. All right, I'm going to kill video and start screen share. And we're going to jump into Intro to Populi Student Billing. And here we go. Good. You should be able to see my screen now. Throw something in the question and answer box if you can't. All right, so before we begin, I always start every one of these this way because I want you guys all to be familiar with how to find help in case this ends up being just too much. Jill says she cannot hear me. Can anyone else comment on that real quick? I just want to make sure my audio is working. If one other person says that they can, then I think that's probably going to be Jill's audio, but I'll double check. Testing, testing, testing. Okay, Jill, sorry, not Jill, Julia. Nicholas says that audio works for him, and so does a few other folks. So, Julia, you're good to go. Okay, well, thank you for bringing that up. I did happen to see the chat window this time around, but if you can find that Q&A box, throw it in there. Even if that wasn't a Q&A thing, it's just easier for me to keep track of that. All right, here we go. Some of this stuff can sometimes be like drinking through a fire hose if you're brand new to Populi. So I always like to start out with, how do you find help? Like, what if you vaguely remember what we talked about, but you don't know how to get it back? Let's jump in on that. The easiest way to find help is to go to the top right and click the help button. If you're the type who likes to research things on your own, then you can click search the knowledge base and dig around there. In fact, we're going to go in there in just a sec and point out a few articles. If you want to reach out to our support team, and we love it when you reach out to our support team, and this isn't just for a select few at your school. We do phone and email support for all your staff, all your faculty at your entire school. We also do email support for students, so we even have a support option for students too. If you do open a support request, that's essentially like gives you an opportunity to write an email to us. When we reply back, it will go into your email, your personal email, depending on what email address you have in your Populi. And you can either read that email there, or you can look them up here under View My Requests. If you have an idea for us for a feature, you can make a feature request here or vote for other people's requests. If you want to interact with other clients on how they might use Populi or things they do, you can go to the user forum here. I said phone and email support. The phone number is 877, the number 4, and the word Populi. Again, that's 877-4 Populi. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. In case you forgot that number, there's a few articles I want to highlight. We've got some promoted articles right up here. In fact, maybe you found out about this student billing live training right here in our promoted articles section. So the things that we want you to pay attention to, we put up here in the promoted articles section, including just some welcome stuff, how to log in, getting started with your school's new Populi site. Even if your school is not new to Populi, but you are, this is kind of a good place to start because it lists all of our training tutorials in a certain order so that you can go through and see what's important and what's the heart of Populi and kind of what's the foundations as you set things up. Also, if you forgot that number or forgot our hours or don't know how to contact us, this little article here, Populi support, how to contact us and what we can do for you. Almost all of these articles, except I think maybe the feature requests and the user forum, almost all of these are public. So you can just copy and paste the link to these and send them off to a staff member. Maybe they're just not the types who are going to come in here, but you found an article that you think would really be helpful to them. Just send it over to them, and that would be great. One thing I love for folks to do is if you want to keep up with what we've been doing in Populi, we release new features every single week. So go to our release notes and hit follow so that you're going to be notified every week for what we've been working on. And then other than that, you just click the bubble that is what you're looking for. Today we're going over student billing. So this is where we're going to go: financial, billing, accounting, and donations. And a few things: setup tasks, daily tasks, financial basics, frequently asked questions, donations. We're going to go getting started because we're just doing the intro. One other thing I should note is that some other ways to get help. I talked about the knowledge base, talked about reaching out to our support team who are on call. They answer pretty quickly. And then another one, which you might have to schedule out a few days, but that is to get your account manager. So that could be me or Nick Holloway, and we'll schedule a one-on-one training webinar with you or your staff. Sometimes it's good to find one of these recordings. We have a YouTube channel where all of these go so that you can at least get an overview of what's going on with student billing or admissions or courses or whatever you need, and then schedule the training webinar with us so that you can get into the details for your specific situation. All right. That's intro, just intro to the intro, just a high level tips and tricks, just in case you didn't know. So for student billing itself, we're going to go through these steps. Now, I'm not going to click on these. You can click on these later. And some of these are pretty high level, but they have links to other articles throughout. So don't think you're dumb or something like that if you don't understand what it means when you just click on here, because it's only, this is barely a page. Maybe that's not enough information for you to understand what you need to do here. Maybe you need to click on the read more about articles to really understand what you need to do here. And we design it that way on purpose, because then later, if you need to kind of have a refresher, you're not bogging down through all the details. You can just hit these steps one at a time and see that high level stuff, hopefully jog your memory. But you then have access to the details if you need them by clicking on those secondary articles. So we're not going to click on these. You can click on these later, but I'm going to run through these visually. Step one, set up your chart of accounts. You can do that by clicking in the, by the way, I have access to everything in Populi in this particular demo college. Some of this data is kind of old, so you're going to have to use your imagination to apply it to your own situation. Maybe in your school, you do not have access to academics or admissions, and that's fine. We're just going to focus on financial. So you would click financial up here in the top black bar, and we're going to go to accounting. We call this accounting. We do have a chart of accounts. We do have something called a general ledger. However, Populi is not a full accounting package. In fact, we pretty much only do the accounts receivable, and we pretty much only do the accounts receivable as applied to your students, except for donations, which could go, to anybody who wants to give you guys money. So it's essentially student billing, financial aid, donations. There's a bookstore, library, there's admissions fees, there's other fees that can feed into here, but it's not going to handle your payroll. It's not going to handle your utility bill, things like that. So step one, you want to set up your chart of accounts. So you're going to put in here everything that would matter to Populi. You might not put in your entire chart of accounts from your main accounting software, but you do want to put in here everything that would matter to Populi. And to do that, just hit add an account, give it an account number. They can have letters, numbers, dashes, whatever. Give it a name, description, and then a type. As far as the account number and name, match it up as best you can with your main accounting software. That will help for reconciliation later. As far as types go, most schools are not going to use subtype, so you can ignore that unless you have a specific situation. You can reach out to our support team and get more questions, get answers on that. We really only have three main types we're going to use. One is asset. This would be accounts receivable, which is built into Populi, some bank accounts, those kinds of things. We also have what's called a liability account. We use liability accounts for all financial aid, even if it's an institutional scholarship. I know not everybody does it that way, but that's how it's built into Populi. The main reason is because we kind of cater toward the federal and aid, and that's more of a liability account because it's not your money, it's just passing through. One other thing you can do with a liability account is you can add it to a fee and make it a deposit. Deposit in the terms of a refundable deposit or a non-refundable deposit where a student has to pay you $1,000 just when they say they're going to show up, and they can get that refunded them or applied to their tuition when they show up. That's what I mean by deposit, not depositing money into a bank, but a deposit like a tuition deposit or a dorm room deposit, something like that. We also have income. Income is just what it sounds like. Usually tuition, fees, room plans, meal plans, donations, bookstore stuff will all fall under income. These other two you're not going to use very often. Equity you'll probably never use, so if you have a specific case where you think you'll need that, reach out to our support team, but it's extremely rare. And then for expense, the only time you would use this are for some specific applications in the bookstore, like inventory shrinkage. And then also, if you ever need to mark an invoice uncollectible, you're going to have to choose an expense account that you probably call bad debt or something like that. And you can have multiple expense accounts if you need to. But that's really the only thing you're going to use it for, except for the bookstore, is to mark invoices uncollectible. So some examples I have here, I've got tuition, I've got fees, I've got room, board, bookstore income, library fines, donations, bookstore shipping. Here's some income accounts. I lump everything into one tuition income account, but if your chart of accounts has three, one for each program, you can do that. You can have different fees accounts instead of lumping them all together into one. And so you can decide how you need to do that. All right, that is step one, set up your chart of accounts. Step two, set up your tuition schedules. So once we have our chart of accounts set up, we can then start telling Populi how to charge our students, because we've got the right accounts where those charges are going to go. If you want to set up a tuition schedule, you're going to go financial billing settings, and you only see the settings button if you have the financial admin role, so you will need that. And then you can go to tuition schedules. We can just click add a tuition schedule, give it a name. Is it tracking units, or sorry, credits or hours? And then what refund schedule should we attach it to? We'll talk about refund schedules or refund policies in just a sec. Those are synonymous in Populi, by the way, refund schedule and refund policy. I've got a few set up here already. Here's my architecture program. This is probably more of an undergrad example, but it's probably the most complex that I've seen, so I decided to use that as an example. We've got different brackets. Both brackets feed into the same tuition account. So remember, we already set those up in accounting, so now we can put those in here. And the way this calculates is between 0 and 11 credits, so part-time, it's going to be a per credit amount only. And then between 12 and 25, it's going to be a flat rate only. I chose 25 because it's just a big number. You could choose 30, 50, whatever. That's just the top. I don't really have a ceiling on this, and so I'm just choosing a big number. I know no students are going to take 25 credits. And now I also have this little extra feature here. So let's say they take 15 credits. Well, it's going to cost them $4,200 flat amount. But I have a little extra feature here, and it's a 4 credits above. So I've got a per credit amount that will kick in 4 credits above 18. So if this student took 19 credits in this example, it would be the flat rate of $4,200 plus a per credit for everything above 18. So that would be 1 times 350 for a total of $4,550. So that's the most complex. I have seen it with folks where it's just this simple. Some credit range that the student could never go over, or hour range if you guys are using hours, and then a per credit amount for that, and you're good to go. Choose your account, good to go. By default, this will apply to all credits that students register for within a particular term. depending on if they have this tuition schedule. It will automatically charge them for that. You can adjust some of those. If I get questions about that, you can let me know, but I'll skip over that because it's not as common for a lot of schools. Again, reach out to our support team if you have some of those unique situations. Now, once you've done this, I'm going to take a little sidestep here before we go on to the next step. And I want to show you some time-saving techniques. Well, before we go into time saving, let me tell you 3 ways you can use the tuition schedule. One is not a time saver at all. In fact, it's the way probably, nobody does this probably. And you probably shouldn't either, but you can. It's a way you can override things that maybe Populi has settings for do automatically for you. But you can add a tuition schedule to a student one by one individually on their profile. You can do a default tuition schedule on their main page, on their dashboard. What this does is that as soon as they register for any credits in any term, Populi will automatically also add this tuition schedule to that particular term. You can, instead of doing the default, just add tuition schedules manually each term. If we've got a default, then that's going to automatically add as soon as they register for courses. So those are the hard ways to do it. The easy way is you go into academics, and you might need your academic team to help you with this, but you attach a tuition schedule to a particular program. So let's do undergrad, and you could do grad. We have a lot of grad schools too, so it could go either way really. But on this program, we've got all my other settings set out, the standings and so on. And then here I've got a default tuition schedule listed, and I can edit that here. And I just check the box that I want to use. And this is pulling from the financial stuff that the financial team just set up. What this does is that during the admissions process, or whenever you add the program to a student, whatever your process might be, as soon as that student gets the program added to their profile, they're going to also automatically get a particular tuition schedule added to their profile. So you can essentially divide up your tuition schedules by program so that you never have to add it yourself. It's just something that happens automatically as students are being entered into the system through the admissions process. That's the easiest way to go. And then manually tweaking it if you ever need to on a weird, one-off case on your students, like I just showed you the one-by-one case. Finally, if you have both the financial access and the academic access, you can go into reporting into Data Slicer. I think I've got another tutorial on how to use Data Slicer where you can look into this, but you can manage tuition schedules here. And this is just a way to add or remove or replace tuition schedules in batch. Let's say you task somebody with adding a bunch of tuition schedules and they did that, or you had the wrong one in your program, something went wrong along the way, and now all of a sudden you have 50 students with the wrong tuition schedule. Get your settings right first, and then come to this report and search for all the folks, filter them down by program or something like that, and then get them the right tuition schedule. All right, a little bit of a side note there, but important, so that you know how to get those to students and save yourself some time. And we're going to look at this on the student side and see those charges getting added here once we get our setup done. Step 3, set up your refund policies. That's right here. And this is the way most folks do it. You essentially just choose some kind of date range and a refund percentage for that date range. And you can build out as many brackets as you want. It's 100% refund before the start of the term. This one I've got looks like by week. So 0 to 7 days, 80%. 8 to 14, 50%. 15 to 21, 25%. We'll cut that one off. And then after that, after 21, no refund. So you can imagine how you might use this. We also have a prorate option. Not as many of our schools use that, but you can dig into that if that's the kind of thing you would use. The handy thing about this then is that you can go back and attach it to your tuition schedule so that this refund policy will automatically add itself to a student when the tuition schedule gets added, which hopefully if you have everything set up right, that tuition schedule automatically got added when you added the program. And what will happen is if the student drops courses, then Populi will create a charge that will offset their invoice amount. All right, step 4, set up your fees. If we click on fees, we can get a quick look of what's going on here. We can see types, max amounts, refund, just some different settings. If I click on a particular fee, or if I want to add a new fee, I've got some settings here to do that. Let's click on one that I've already got created, and we'll hit edit. Very similar to that add page, but I can give it a name and a description, and I can decide how this is calculated. Flat rate per credit per course. Could also have per clinical hour or per hour, depending on what kind of school you have. Some of you might not see the clinical hour because you're not an acupuncture school or a nursing school or some of those that we have. You might just be a credit school, or you might be an hour school and you'll see that pop up. But you can decide how it's going to calculate. Right now I've got this lab fee as a per course for 30 bucks. No max amount. If I wanted to, I could say, well, I don't really want it to go above 90, even if they take 5 of these courses. But I'll leave that blank. I can decide some settings here. Is it refundable? Does financial aid apply to this fee? And should I report it on the 1098-T? And then finally, going back to that chart of accounts we first set up, what's the income account that this would connect to? If I wanted to turn this into a deposit, then I could choose a liability account. And then I'll get a little option here. Is this a deposit or not? For now, we're just going to call it an income account, lab fee. If you need to delete this fee, you can go ahead and do that. I would never delete a fee unless it was obviously a mistake. So don't delete things in Populi unless they were never supposed to be there. If they're historically supposed to be there, but you're not going to use them in the future, then retire them. And so you'll see these differences. You often have, whether it's on fees or even in courses and stuff like that, you'll see an option to retire or to delete. That's the difference. Retire means I want it there historically, but I'm not going to use it in the future. Delete means I don't know how we got this set up. It should have never been there in the first place. We just need it out. Once I have the fee set up, then I can add it to any student I want manually, or if I want to save time, then I can set up some kind of rules that will attach it to students automatically. And I need to kind of use my analytical brain to make this work. But this one says if I've got any students enrolled in this course group, 100 level architecture, or this course group, 200 level architecture, they're going to get that $30 per course fee. And the academic team, they're the ones who set up course groups. They can name them whatever they want and put whatever courses in there. And it doesn't even have to be connected with anything academic. In fact, you could ask your academic team, can you just make me a course group called Lab Fee Course Group or something? And they could lump all those into a course group for you. It doesn't affect anything on their academic side, but you'll be able to grab it and then put it into, make it some kind of rule for a fee. Lots of other options here too. I could say all enrolled credits between 1 and 11. So this would be kind of a part-time thing. I could do the same thing with hours and so on. If it's enrolled not in a course group, but a very specific course like math, something or other. Auditing is handled on the fee side in Populi, not the tuition side. So I can do auditing in one particular course gets this fee. Auditors in a certain course group gets a particular fee. Or I just say, no, I just have one auditing fee. It's a per credit thing for any course, just all the way across the board. And I could do that here. Lots of other things. I won't go through them all, but degrees, specializations, those can all have different fees. Course delivery method would be online versus on campus. Tuition schedules, meal plans, different campuses, programs. The two that I'll highlight real quick, or the few I'll highlight, is one is term name. So I could say if the term name matches the word fall, then yes, this fee happens. By default, these fees are going to kick in every single term that a student registers for courses. So if I want it to only happen once a year, then I could choose a particular term for that. Or I could say, no, this is every term except for fall. So it does not match the text fall. And if I want to do multiple terms, then I can add multiple rules with multiple names there. The final two I want to point out are custom info and tag. So if you're tagging students a certain way, or you've got some sort of custom info field where you're tracking data on them a certain way, you can add fees to anyone who meets those requirements. If you're having trouble with this, just reach out to our support team. They can look at it, especially if you've got some student who's not calculating fees like you think they should. Give them the name of that student and the fee you think should be there and the fee that shouldn't be there or whatever, and they can dig through and tell you why it's calculating the way it is. Step 5, room and board, meal and room plans. These are pretty straightforward, not very complex. You just hit add a meal plan, give it a name, give it an account, and give it an amount. And this would be an amount for the term. So this meal plan, and that's really all it is. Full meal plan, $1,200 for the term, lunch only $700 for the term. We don't have any cafeteria module thing where you swipe a card and it reduces the amount, that they have allotted for them or anything like that. Nothing sophisticated as that. It's just, this is the amount, this is what it costs for the term. Room plans are similar. I just add a name, add an account, and then add an amount. And so here, if I only have one roommate, this is a 2-bedroom apartment, then it's a little higher. If it's a 3-bedroom apartment, it's a little lower. I can split it among more people. But this is just per term. So if your school has a dorm and you do monthly rents, we don't really have a good workaround for that. You can try and figure some stuff out. You can ask some folks on our team if they've got any ideas, but really this is designed for one amount for the term, not really designed for a monthly rent kind of leasing situation. Room plans do have a few extra features because we have a campus life section where the campus life team can manage which rooms have availability, which of your dorm rooms have availability, who's in what room, violations connected to those rooms, maybe even associated with fees. So there's some things that room plans will open up when it comes to adding them to your particular dorm rooms for your campus life folks. But other than that, it's very similar to just the meal plans. Step 6, set up your payment plans. We've got a couple here. You can add as many of these as you want. You can add, I've got 2, you can add 6, you can add 15, 20, whatever. You're essentially creating a template here that you're going to then apply to students. And then the individual student, you can kind of tweak and change as you go along. So here's one template. Basic plan is what I've got it called. We'll go ahead and hit edit so I can see some of the options. I give it a name. I can add a fee to this plan. So the basic plan fee here, again, this is tied to a particular fee I've got set up in my fees, which is tied to a particular account. This is based on percentage of the charges on the plan, 3%. I could also do just a flat fee of $100 or whatever. If it goes late, then I can charge a late fee. This one's 3%, but I could also do a flat fee for this one too. I can also do a maximum amount if I'm concerned that 3% might get too crazy or something. I can do a grace period for the late payments, and then I can do a minimum amount. This one's $500. So no invoice less than 500 can be applied to this payment plan. Now these are all optional. You don't even need to use these if you don't want to, but they are there if you want to take advantage of them. Financial aid, you almost always should have this box checked. What this does is it subtracts out scheduled aid before calculating the student payments. In other words, if the student is scheduled to get some money in a month, but it hasn't got any money yet, we're going to just assume that that money is going to come through and have the student make payments accordingly. If we did it the other way, where we assumed they weren't going to get the money and then the student started overpaying you and then got the money, then you've got to figure out a way to write a refund check and get it back to them. You can do it either way, but most schools I see have this box checked. You have rounding. If you have recurring payments set up with our credit card merchant, if you have Populi connected to your credit card merchant, that's either Stripe, You can look up Stripe at stripe.com. Stripe is in a striped shirt, or authorize.net. Those are the two options. Then you can have this box checked, and then when the student goes and pays online, which we'll look at a little bit, they can actually choose what payment plan they want to take advantage of. I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, but you can actually choose which charges are eligible for this payment plan. By default, it's just going to be all charges. And then finally, the schedule. This is a 3-payment payment plan. The last payment is always just whatever's left over, the balance due. And I'll show you why that matters in a little bit. But we've got payment number 1 is 33.33% of the total. Payment number 2, 33.33% of the total. And then whatever's left is payment 3, the balance due. I've got this one based on number of days into the term. So the first payment's due 10 days into the term, and then 30, and then 60. I could also do specific calendar dates. I could also do whenever the plan was applied. So it would be kind of a student by student basis. Their schedule would be, it's just whenever I added it to their account. Or I could go the easy way and just say, it's just, $1,000 a month on the 5th day of the month, as long as they've got a balance. So there's no set amount when it's going to end. It will end when they're done. All right, step 7, check templates. We can't really go into this here. These are pretty involved. So if you want Populi to print checks for you so that you can give checks to students, the best thing to do is to reach out to our support team so that you can make sure that we're going to be printing onto your checks correctly. And it's going to be different for each school, so I can't really cover that. Step 8, online bill pay. To set this up, we're going to go into settings here. And this is a great place to look over just all your general settings. Look them over one by one. There's quite a few here. Well, not too many, I guess, but enough to where you want to take a look at them. If you have any questions, reach out to our support team with the specific one, and they'll be able to explain it further. There might be some stuff in the help system on each one too. And then we've got online payments. These are all required to set up if you want online payments to work. And so you'll need to look through these and double check with our team if you need to. You can do a minimum online payment, something that makes it worth it for you to get charged that fee. You can do a credit card convenience fee. So these are the kinds of things you can put in here. And then finally, we've got payment gateways. There are 2 different gateways you can connect Populi to. One is Stripe, we've already mentioned them, and the other is authorize.net. To add one, you just click Add a Payment Gateway. Stripe is very easy for developers, at least, to interact with, so we've been able to set up some things much easier than we have with authorize.net. So it's a lot easier for you folks to sign up for them. Just click Connect to Stripe. You'll be taken to this form. If you already have an account with Stripe, then you can sign in here. If you don't, let this load. Then you just fill out this information. Who are you? Where do you want the money to go? Stuff like that. I think it's 2 or 3 pages long. So it takes about 5 minutes if you've got all the data in front of you. Pretty easy to sign up. You can even sign up for e-checks, possibly. We only allow schools that are accredited to sign up for e-check, but it's a much cheaper way to gather payments from students. So if you don't have that available and you are accredited, let us know. We can turn that on for you. The second way is authorize.net. And to do authorize.net, we do have an option here that's very specific, signing up with authorize.net. And there's some special pricing here. So you can look into that on your own. If you're already connected to authorize.net directly, then you have to go to them. There's no real form except for this little handy form of the MULA thing. Then you have to go to them and enter your login and transaction key. You can also use authorize.net to kind of connect to anybody like PayPal or whatever, Chase Payment Tech as a gateway. Although if you do it that way, the recurring payment stuff will not work. So you have to be connected to authorize.net in a certain way, primarily with MULA, but I think it will work even if you're just connected to authorize.net directly. for the recurring payment stuff to work. And here you can have multiple gateways set up. You see I've got 3, they're all Stripe, but I could have one that's authorized.net, and I can decide how things get transacted. So I could maybe have my bookstore on one, so it has its own bank account, own credit card merchant, and then all the rest be another. That could be one option. All right, I have a question on, could you please go back to the payment plan setting? Let's do this. If you can ask me a particular question, then I can go back and answer it using the visual. But so go ahead and see if you can come up with a question that you're wanting to look at, and we can go to that specifically, and I'll wait for that. Keep an eye open for that. All right, set up your students' financial info, look over general financial settings. So we've gone through all the steps. So let's kind of walk through how this is actually going to work. We've set everything up. What does all this mean? So let's go to a particular student. So here at Simon Student, I can go to his financial page. I can see his dashboard. I can see all of his unpaid invoices, all the unapplied payments and credits, and any recent transactions. Because I'm connected to his credit card merchant, he can call me up and I can click make a payment on his behalf, and I can see what's overdue, what's due right now, what he needs to pay right now because there's some credits he has in his account that we need to deal with. I can see all the detailed charges. And he can do this too. If he logs in, he can see all this stuff. In fact, maybe instead of when he calls in and wants to pay with a credit card, you say, oh, here's how you do it. Just log in and click this button so that he can learn how to do it on his own. If you have both e-check and credit card set up, then they can do that here. Credit card, you can add a convenience fee to. And then finally, he can choose, this is a one-time payment. He can set up his own monthly amount if he wants, or he can choose that payment plan that we've allowed. So I think basic plan is the only one we've allowed for him to choose. And so then this will get drafted on these dates, and it notifies him of that. Also, if someone else is paying, both you and Simon have access to this link where you can just copy and paste this and forward it on, maybe give it to his parents or his church or his employer or whoever might be paying for him. And they'll be able to have access to that payment themselves and be able to pay on his behalf. If he's doesn't want to pay with credit card, he wants to give you a check, then you can click record payment here. Type in an amount. Say who paid it. They have to be in Populi for you to choose them. What the method is, reference number, what the asset account is, and then Populi will auto fill in starting with the oldest invoice to the newest. So here we've got $1,000 on this one, even though there's some expected aid. That's probably going to show up for that one. And I can manually override that if I want to. Finally, if I want to add a payment plan, so we talked about payment plans, I can do that here. Let's see. I want to add. So some of these are below the minimum amounts, but I can check the box on a few of these. And then see how Populi is going to split this payment out. This one's a 5-payment plan called long-term, and I can see what that's going to look like. Once I hit save, here we go. Here's my schedule going out into the future. If I need to edit this, so maybe this particular student, for whatever reason, needs me to change some due dates. He's going to be late on this one, so he's going to be 2 weeks late. Well, I'll bump that back 2 weeks. That's okay. Or he's going to skip this one. Watch my balance, my final amount due. So remember, this is a 5-payment plan. Last one's a balance due. I can delete this due date, and then my balance due is going to increase. That's why we have the balance due at the end, because if you need to delete a payment along the way, then they're going to get this balance due right at the end. You can also add deadlines along the way if you need to add something more or tweak this. So essentially, that's why I said when you set up the payment plan, you're setting up a template. And then when you add it to the student, you can adjust it on a student by student basis if that's what you guys do. All right, so what's the process of charging students? How does that work? As students register for courses, then they are going to get charged according to the tuition schedule, according to the fees, all that automated stuff. You're going to manually, or maybe have your campus life folks manually add the room and board stuff, put them in dorm rooms, whatever. And every time something generates a charge, it's going to go here, billing, current, pending charges, and it's going to go onto this list. So I can see every single charge all the way down. By the way, in Populi, every table in Populi is filterable. So I could filter this table down by tuition charges or fee charges, or even a very specific type of charge. And once I filter that down, I can email that group, text that group, export them to a spreadsheet, and maybe even add a few data columns along the way. I can add whatever data columns I want. Maybe I just want their primary contact info for now. And when I hit go, then that will give me a spreadsheet with all that data. Or I can do some special stuff depending where I'm at. And here I can just invoice everybody in batch. Now I wouldn't invoice everybody in batch if you're just starting out, because you want to make sure that Populi is calculating the payments according to how you want it to. And you might need to tweak some of your fee rules to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. But if I click on Teresa here, it'll take me to her term that was listed there and the pending charges. So essentially, this moves from pending. We've got some in the pending, and we've got some invoice. Looks like we've got $30 invoice for this particular term. This is old data, so bear with me. But the difference between pending and invoiced is that pending is just Populi's calculation, and it's kind of in this holding tank for you to review to make sure everything looks good. In fact, while it's pending, you've got this little pencil, and you can increase or decrease the amount. You could delete it altogether. You could change it to something else. And so you can mess around with those things. Once I want to invoice it, so if I want to invoice pending, my due date's automatically 30 days out. I'm going to invoice both these charges and hit save. Then I've got a new invoice here, invoice 497, and all my pending stuff moved to invoice. And actually what happens behind the scenes is this when it hits the ledger. This is when it hits the ledger. So a journal entry has been made once I've invoiced. No journal entry is ever made while it's in a pending state. So all those little changes you might have made to the pending stuff, it's not messing around with all the stuff on your ledger. It's not doing anything. That's not going to happen until you finally invoice them. Once I've invoiced them, I can take a look at the invoice. I can mark it uncollectible. Remember, we talked about that before. I've got to choose an expense account. Here's one called bad debt, and that will make a journal entry. I can add a payment plan very specifically to this invoice only instead of to the entire student and all their invoices like I did before. And I can see the specific transaction that occurred even in detail to see what accounts it hit. So it looks like we debited accounts receivable, 4,200 and 4,500, and we credited tuition income 4,200 and fees 4,500. I can, once something is invoiced, I cannot change it. I can only get rid of it by hitting void on the transaction associated with that invoice. And then I've got to start over again. So just heads up on that. Be careful before you start invoicing things, because if it's kind of set in stone, it's going to mess around with the ledger, and you want to make sure you're careful before you do that. Nicholas asks, we have two separate audit rates, one of which is for senior citizens. Is there a way to set up fee rules based on the age of the student? That's a good question. And I do not believe that that's possible. Not on the age, at least. Let's take a look at some of our fee rules here. Unfortunately, not based on age. However, I could create a custom info field that says senior citizen, yes or no, or I could tag them and call them senior citizens. The difference is that a tag is something all staff can see. So if you don't want all staff to see that, you might not want to use a tag. Custom info field depends on the department. You can do custom info fields for that only financial people can see, that only academic people that can see, that only admissions people can see, and you can pull fees off any one of those. You can even do some general info like contact type stuff. Good question, Nicholas. Lidby, can you email students that are in a payment plan to remind them that their payment is coming up? You can email students whenever you want. You just go to their profile and you click email this student or send them a text message. There are some default reminders that will get sent out to students automatically from Populi, and you can reach out to our support team and ask them the specific dates on those and when those occur. Good question there. Julia, if you need to apply a payment plan in the middle of a semester, do you need to unapply customer payments or enrollment deposits, apply the payment plan, and then reapply the payment/deposits? I'm not sure I understand this question, Julia. So if I add a payment plan, let me take a guess. If I add a payment plan at any time, it's going to go off the total of what's owed. It's not going to go off. So it will take into account any customer payments. So maybe that's your question. And so you would not need to unapply customer payments or things like that. It's going to take those into account and consider those already paid. And so it will decrease the payment plan amount. I suppose if you want the payment plan to not include those, then yes, you'd have to, but I don't think many of our schools are doing it that way, but hopefully I understood that, Julia, and that was helpful. But ask again if you need to. We've got 10 more minutes. I'm going to clean up a few things. I mentioned deposits earlier. So deposits are a handy little tool. We put them in a liability account because it's possibly not your money, especially if the student gives it and it's going to be applied as a credit or maybe going to be refunded back to the student, like a dorm room deposit would be refunded. But here I've got a deposit. I called it deposit 3215. Right now it's unpaid. So the student has not paid for this deposit yet. So we don't have their money, but it is a charge on their account. And then what I can do here, again, this is like really bad because the student hasn't paid it. So we've got it in red. But let's say the student had already paid it and I've got their money. What am I going to do with that money now that I've got this deposit? It all depends on what it is. If it's a dorm room and it's come to the end of the term, then you can refund it to the student and give it 100% refund. Or maybe you're not going to quite refund everything, only 60% of it, or only $800 of it. Either way, you can decide that they trashed some stuff, so they're not going to get everything back. Or you could say, this is a tuition deposit, so I'm going to apply it to the student's account. And we'll say 100% of this goes to the student's account, or only 50% does, and I hit save, and then I can open it up again and then mark the other 50% as forfeit. So there's some different ways I can handle that deposit money to clear it out from here and then put it on their account, mark it as forfeit, refund it back to the student, etc. If I do add anything to a student's account as a credit, or if some aid comes through, then it will land here in unapplied payments or credits, and I can hit apply to apply that to a particular invoice. I also have some settings that can auto apply aid payments. So I obviously didn't have that set up when this came through, so I have to manually apply it. One final thing that's kind of handy is this little history button. I can look and see sort of a running balance of my life with this student and what their account balance has been along the way and what they've paid down and what's been added and where they're at right now. if I ever need to refund the student, so for example, I've got this $450 that I could apply to an invoice, or maybe I just want to refund them, then a little feature will pop up called refund credit balance. And Populi will restrict me to only refund like credits. So this is an aid payment. So Populi is not going to let me refund it as just an overpayment by the student, a non-aid overpayment. It's going to restrict me to I think it's the Christian Amos Scholarship is where he got this money. So I would refund it back there. And I could print a check out here. So this is what's getting refunded is money from this. Finally, I can apply a financial lock. There's 3 different locks in Populi. One is a grades lock, so the student cannot see any of their grades. The other is a registration lock, so the student cannot register for future courses. And the last is a financial lock, which is both of those two together. And so let's say Simon needs to pay some money. I can say lock it down, needs to pay, and then hit save. Now, you might want to word that differently than needs to pay because that's going to be visible to the student. In fact, they'll see this giant yellow bar with a red lock that tells them why. And if they go to their grades, they'll see that there. In fact, the registrar will see it. Everybody will see it. So the registrar, even though they can still see the grades, will know not to give out any grades at this time because there's a financial lock applied. I can also apply this lock in batch up here under my reporting section. So pending charges, once I've invoiced these, they go into unpaid invoices, and unpaid invoices I can filter down maybe by due date. So everything that's overdue, once I filter that down, I can add a lock and put my reason here that the student will see and hit save. I can also see student balances here. Quite a few tables, so you guys can dig through these, look at stuff by term, either in summary or specific charges. Look at my recurring payments. So if any students have opted in to do a recurring payment plan, I can edit those amounts and stuff like that. I can do some reporting. I have an aging report. And then finally, when it is time to reconcile my books, I can go to my little tab here called General Ledger. I can choose a particular date range. By default, this is the last month. Let's say though, instead I want to do, we're going to just do the month of September. And I can see all accounts that had some change during that month and the debits and credits from those accounts. I can then export this and import it into my main accounting software, or I can just kind of put these two side by side and make the appropriate journal entries in my main accounting software. So you're not going to have student detail, at least most of our clients don't, have student detail in your main accounting software. You're just going to reconcile the changes that Populi has made to different accounts and bring that over to your main accounting software, either once a month or once a week or however often you do it. If it doesn't reconcile and there's something wrong, that's when you have to start digging, and you can do that by hitting detail. And so then here we can list out different transactions and who it is and the amounts of each one, or I can dig into all these transactions. Here are some of the other reporting mechanisms I showed you earlier. All right, that is an overview and even in depth in a few places on the student billing. We've got 3 minutes left. Any final questions? All right. Well, it was good spending this time with you all, and I hope this was helpful. If you have any further questions, reach out to our support team. We'd love to hear from you. And if you need more of a one-on-one training, then reach out to your account manager, and you can do a training webinar. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.